Hello, hello, good morning, and welcome to Journey to SCA 2024. This is Shelley Edwards Barron, your host, and today we're talking reports, narratives, and comprehension as we do every week on a Tuesday, usually closer to 11 o'clock, but today I don't know. For the past few weeks, I've been working on preparing stuff, and as you can see, I'm in a different location. I hope the background noise isn't um, going to be an issue with hearing me. Um, I'm sort of renovating, shifting offices, moving space. So I am kind of like out front here. So it might, I don't know if you're hearing like the background, the traffic, those kinds of things. So I hope you can still hear me. Just let me know in the chat if I need to speak up, speak a little bit more clearly, repeat something. I'll be fine. If you're looking at it, during the replay, put a comment and, I'll come back and I'll respond. I check comments every single time so that I could respond and give you the information that you need. So, welcome. Thank you for joining me, whether you're looking at the live or the replay. Appreciate you being here. And today we're going to cover a few things. With reports, we're dealing with the activity reports. With narratives, we're looking at revising and editing narratives. And with comprehension, we're talking a little bit about purpose with comprehension. So um, let me see. I know in the group SEA, the Peacefield approach, with the change in the algorithm with Facebook, the views are not. Let me see. I'm going to tag everyone in this. Can I? Because it's not coming up in the feed like it used to, so that I know some of you are kind of looking for it and not able to find it. And no, I can't tag everyone. So maybe I'll just put the copy. Just give me a minute. Let me deal with this because I want, that those who are here live can find it live so that they'd be able to follow. All right. So yeah, let me take that off. And I'll just put the link. Here's the link. Yeah, I don't know. With social media, they change things up and you don't even realize that it's changed because they don't often send you the notices. But all right, so okay, so let's get into it. I think I've done what I can so that people can find the live. It's best really to look at it via YouTube. That way, when it comes up, it's going to be there definitely on the YouTube channel. So you can like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then on a Tuesday, just go to the lives section and it will come up and it's going to be there. No worries. Replays are on SEA Peacefield, they're on YouTube, as well as on my Facebook page and on my website. I put the replays there as well for the recordings so that you'd be able to find them quite easily and not have to navigate or search through, Facebook all the time. So those are the easy ways to find it. All right, so let's look at activity reports. So yeah, my monitor that I bring up all the information on. Yeah, I feel a little out of sorts today with the with this different setup, but I'm going to be settled in my new space soon. So we can get that. I'll go back to the other one I had before for a bit and then come back to these. All right, so we're looking at activity reports and we're studying activity reports this week, having already done incidents, accidents, and competitions. And today we're shifting focus to activity reports. So if you've been following the series, then at this point, what you're doing is focusing on activity reports, doing research on activity reports, studying them in a little bit more detail. So prior to this point, what we were doing in the earlier part of the series We looked at um, the skills and the foundation elements like, the paragraphing format, what goes into each paragraph, facts versus opinions. We looked at transition words and phrases, formal language, formal tone, and many of the detailed skills that were required. Now we're looking more at the information that goes into the report. And so students already have the skills. What we want them to do now is to research and focus on the content, the kind of information that would be needed in the actual details. So, few weeks ago, when we looked at what goes into each paragraph, we looked at the general ideas of the kind of information. Now we want to go into more specific details. So, this is the fourth installation of that. So if you have not looked at competition incidents and accidents yet, just go back 3 weeks and you would get those. You can check in the archives, all the different places that I mentioned. The information is stored and you can review those. Today we're looking at activities. So let's just review a definition of an activity. Now, I know some students mix events and activities, and that affects the way they would go into the information and present. So, make sure that students understand the definition of an activity and what makes it different from an event. So, the first thing is that an activity, just as the name suggests, gives the idea of the participants in the report being active. So usually the writer of the report would be an active participant in whatever is happening. And so we're looking at specific kinds of things that are happening as well. We're looking at things that are usually done for the purpose of education and sometimes fun, but the idea is that the participant, whether the writer of the report or whichever group they're referring to, these are active participants in what is happening, and the purpose of the activity is different from a competition or any of the other types of reports. So when I reference the different types of reports, the main thing that we consider and that I consider is the purpose of the report and the purpose of the event or the activity or the competition, the purpose of the situation that the student is reporting on. So, what is the purpose of the situation that an activity report is written on? Is usually some sort of educational thing or I would say maybe fun, depending on because most of the activity reports that we look at in the context of SEA, they have to do with like field trips and creation of posters and those types of things. So you really want to focus on things that are more educational. And there's a large range of things that students can engage in within the school context or, after school context and so on that is educational. And educational doesn't necessarily mean um, academic. They could be learning other things and other principles. So, for example, a beach cleanup would be considered an activity report and it's not necessarily academic in nature, but the participants are learning to care for the environment. They learn things about littering. They might learn about the wildlife and so on. So it is still educational. And so that's the main thing with the activity report and how a student could now further understand the kind of information that goes into this activity report and therefore would be able to brainstorm and make a list and therefore research activity reports more effectively. So just as we did, and just as I recommended with the competition accidents and incidents, you want to start with the definition, make sure it's clear what an activity is, make sure students understand how an activity is different from other types of reports. And the one in particular to pay attention to is, well, competition and event. So competitions, we know an activity is different from a competition because activities don't have prizes, winners, and losers. Competitions do. So even if you have like a token of appreciation in an activity, is not considered a prize per se. It's really just sharing appreciation. For competitions, it's a prize for something that was accomplished. And that's where that difference is. And then you have a winner. So you'd have like first, second, third, or at least somebody getting more points than another person, or groups getting more points. That's competition. Activities, we don't have point allocation or anything like that. Now, what makes an activity different from an event is the structure of the situation. Like I said, with an activity, students or the participants are very actively engaged in the outcome. With an event, the participants are quite often detached from the outcome in the sense that you have a speaker and an audience type situation. Usually, the person who is writing the report would be one or the other. They can either be the presenter or they can be someone in the audience. And so, usually, in an event situation, you have a speaker audience context. That is very different from an activity where the participants of the report are very actively involved doing things to create the outcome of the situation and observe and sort of like everything in one. But the event is either a presenter or an audience listening, and that's how you would distinguish between the two. So make sure students are clear on that, because the next step in studying and researching the activity reports is brainstorming a list of activities that they can now go and get information about and gather details so that they will know what kind of things they can put in the paragraphs 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because remember, paragraph 1 is fairly set. And if you've been following, or if you have a copy of my the 5 reports challenge, you would have a sample report and a breakdown of what goes into that paragraph 1 exactly, sentence by sentence, so you know what to do there. If you don't have a copy, you should get a copy, because like I said, you're going to get that breakdown, exactly what is going to go into that activity report, introduction, sentence by sentence. And there's a specific format that works really well with developing that formal tone right from the introduction. So send me a WhatsApp message to 7174993, and this would be five reports challenge. um right, and that would give you the information that you need. So what I'm talking about here, you will get practical examples on that. And of course, it's 5 reports, so what you would be getting is the competition, incident, accident, activity, and incidents, accidents, competition, activity, and event. And then I also added in a separate booklet on the natural disasters. Plus, you're getting information on vocabulary, editing. There are about 11 digital booklets in all, and you can print the sections that you need, but it's as comprehensive as I could have made it to give you all that you require in terms of following this. And so, but it's like a practice booklet. Remember, it's called a challenge. So it's a practice booklet. So what I'm sharing with you now would be notes that you would need to take, do your research, and then you use that booklet series to practice writing and double checking to see if the reports were done effectively. So for your research, You know what an activity report is, what is required, and then you want to brainstorm. And I would say list as many as possible. You want to try to get at least 10, and going to making that list shouldn't be too difficult, especially there's more than one student involved and you're working with the you're having discussions and making notes and so on. But you want to make a list. So we've already spoken about field trips, and you can do field trips to different places. So that alone is, you can get at least 5 just with field trips. Field trips to the zoo, field trips to national monuments, you have museums, you have the Pitch Lake, you have one of the forts. You can do Fort George. You can do any of the forts in Tobago, as well as Fort George there, Fort George, Tobago, Trinidad. Um, we have field trips to factories, so you can do a field trip to, let's say, Kiss Baking Factory, Solo Beverages. I've actually been on field trips to those places. I think Bermuda's this one. I don't know. I haven't been on that one, so I'm not sure. But there are other places. The chocolate manufacturing, there's a field trip done on that one as well. You can get a field trip to, where else? Maybe one of those know your country tours kind of things. So just on field trips alone, we have a list of reports that students can encounter. Have them make a list of that. So you could probably do just 10 on field trips alone. And then we have other types of activities, like an activity that could be done in class. So like class projects, have students brainstorm what kinds of class projects they can be involved in. Then we have community projects. Have students brainstorm the kinds of community projects that they can be involved in. And so have them brainstorm that, and then have them do research about what actually happens during these types of situations. So when you go on a field trip, what actually happens? If you go on a field trip to the fort, how is that different from a field trip to a factory? What happens at a factory field trip? What happens at a Pitch Lake field trip, Wildfowl Trust field trip? What happens during that field trip? Then brainstorm, okay, if it's a class activity, what happens during a class activity? What kind of activity it is? How do you create the projects and all those things? And then you can think about, okay, so we have field trips, class activities, and I think that's generally the two groups of, oh, community activities, which are similar to class activities because you can do cleanup for the community, you can do cleanup with your class, but where you're going to clean up might be different. So, yeah, so look at community activities, class activities, and field trips. Those are like the three categories. Um, Let me put that up for you. Maybe that would help. So, activities. So we could say like three categories of activities: field trips, class, classroom activities, and community activities, right? So those are the three categories of activities you want to work with. And so then what you're doing is making a list of as many activities as you can think of that a student can report on, and then break it down to something manageable. Or if you're working with a class, then you can have groups in the class, or individuals or peers, depending on the size of your class, research different activities and come up with the details. Because what we're aiming for this week is to help students with the details. They know what kind of information they should put, but do they know what the actual details are? So, for example, if they go on a field trip to the zoo, Do they know that you can have a guide in the zoo that takes the group around and tells them things? Presents information. Do they know that they would bring animals for the students to interact with when you do a field trip on the zoo to the zoo? All of that kind of thing is possible. But are they aware of that? If they're going on a trip to the pitch lake, are they aware of what the situation is? Do they know that there's a little museum with the at the pitch lake that you could visit and learn other things than just what the guide is telling you? So some of those kinds of details they may not know, so they may not know what to put. So they know they have to report on what happens before, but then how far back do they go with the before, and where do they start? Do they include the trip on the maxi? Is that relevant? How, so those are the kinds of things that you want to get clear during this week when it comes to activity reports. So we're listing all the different types of activities. We are determining what is most relevant for someone who's reading a report on this kind of activities. And we're brainstorming about the kind of information, because one of the things that I hear teachers complaining about a lot is students don't know the details to include. Sometimes they make it up and it doesn't quite work. And we spoke about that a little bit with the competition reports. It's the same thing. Some students don't know about these major competitions. Some students have never experienced panorama competition or carnival competition at their school or parang or anything like that. So they don't know what to put in the details. And it's the same thing with the activity. Let's say you get a report, you participated in let's say you went on a field trip to the pitch lake. Some students have never been, and so they don't know what the tour is like, what the place looks like, what the guides would tell them, what they would do during a tour like that. They don't recognize that there is usually a tour guide. They don't recognize that the tour guide generally asks questions. Students can ask and answer questions. They don't know how to go about filling in the information because they've never been. So this is what you're working on this week to help students really understand and engage with the content of the report. So when you hear the teacher says insufficient details, not enough information, you could have added this and you could have added that. Where is that information coming from? How does the student know what to put? They have to research. And I'm going to keep saying this over and over because I think it's very important. You see, this idea of the writing process that that students have to engage with. I think getting them really involved in that process and the structure of it from now is going to make a big difference in their academic career. And when I say writing process, what I mean is pre-writing, writing, and well, we call it, I'm just going to group it as post-writing activities, right? Um, but we do have, let me call that, I'll not just say writing, I'll call it drafting and then rewriting. Let's do it like that. Maybe that would work a little bit better for you so you can see the details of the process, all right? So pre-writing, drafting, rewriting, and then, well, presenting. So each stage of this writing process has some activities that you want students to get familiar with, because you don't want students thinking that they get a prompt and they just jump into write. They have to gather their thoughts, gather the information, do a plan, write, go back to that what they've written, that's a draft, make changes, and then they present. You want your child to get used to that idea, because guess what is going to happen at secondary school, and guess what is going to happen at university again and again and again, every paper that they have to do, including their final thesis. It's also going to happen at work when they get to work. And if they don't get this idea of the writing, pre-writing, writing, and post activities, which would be like the revising and the polishing up and then presenting, it's going to feel tedious and difficult, and then they're going to enter writing situations always feeling distressed because of all these things that they feel they have to do. If it's broken up and they get it done incrementally, it's not going to feel as distressing. Their writing is going to be better and they're going to gain so much more from it. So get them used to it. Get them used to the idea of the pre-writing, drafting, rewriting, really let them see that it's a process and that they can manage that process effectively. So the next thing is that's what you're doing this week for the reports. So let me just recap that. So we're being clear on definitions, making sure it's distinct from the other types of reports. We're brainstorming on the different situations that students would have to report on. And then we are looking at the content, researching, getting details, getting the facts that can be included so that they are clear on what details they can add to the report. So they might have a general idea of what they have to put in, but then if it's a field trip to the pitch lake, what happens before, what happens during, what happens immediately after, what are the consequences and outcomes? Are there consequences? No, it's a field trip. So what are the outcomes? We focus on that, but then students have to be able to break it down. What can they put? Let them do a little bit of research. We have more than enough time. If you've missed any of the previous videos where we looked at incidents, accidents, and competitions, go back to those. Just go back 3 weeks from today and get the first one, which would be incidents, and you can go through. We have more than enough time. There are 6 basic types of reports. 5 of them we focus on more than the others. The natural disasters may or may not be a factor, but it's worth considering. So altogether, you have 6, and that should take you no more than 6 weeks. Because what are you doing during that time? Brainstorming. Let's say you spend 5 days working on it. First day you brainstorm. Well, you get the definitions clear. Make sure you know what's the difference between this and other types of reports. Second day, you brainstorm topics. The third day, you gather information. Fourth day, gather information. Fifth day, you can gather information as well because you're discussing while you're gathering the information. And that's what you're doing this week. At the end of that, then you can start writing reports and really getting into it because now the students have the skills, which we looked at before, and now they have the content, and then they can put it all together. Which brings me to my December classes are finally up. Registration links are there. You can go to, um, let's see, Word Coach. Yeah, let me not call it off the top of my head. I'll put it on the screen for you in a bit. But I have a class in report writing if that's the area that you want to give your child a little extra. um, there's a separate class on narrative writing. Then there's another class on comprehension. So this time around, I'm adding in comprehension because I realized that I'm actually really good at developing students' comprehension skills. Um, and I say it that way because originally I'm a writing instructor. And I believe writing and reading are so connected that you really can't separate them. But of course, for learning purposes, we separate and we go bit by bit. Students who I engage with comprehension tend to do pretty well. There's one student in particular that I'm absolutely, it blew me away, and this is what really had me thinking, hey, you could do comprehension too. Um, when she came to me, she was in the 70s, like in percent wise, 72, 75, I think, around there. Sometimes she would peak 80s, but average, let's say 75 to 80, that was the average. We spent 3 months working on things with her comprehension, and she got into early, like late. 80s, early 90s. And by the time she did the exam, I think she got like 94% on the exam itself. So that, I mean, she worked really hard on that for sure, but the guidance I was able to give her made a difference. So I'm offering a comprehension class um, this December. It's an intensive class, 1 week, 2 hours a session. So we're getting 10 hours altogether, focusing on the different types of comprehension. And that's the thing that many people don't recognize is really the foundation and the place to begin. What are the different types of comprehension? So there are some skills and strategies that apply across the board, but to really master comprehension, you have to master nonfiction, fiction, poetry, and graphic separately, not all at once. And that's what I'm going to be getting into with the students with the comprehension. And with the narratives, you have been going through the lives, so you have the skills, you have some content. We're going to be refining that, doing some writing practice, and I'm actually um, going to do a 30-minute one-on-one session for every student who registers, which is why I'm keeping the group to size 10. So please register now. I'm trying to get it done early because I'm doing things a little bit differently this time around. I'm doing three things differently. One, when you register your child for the narrative or report writing classes, I'm going to be sending a list of prompts and I need a response. So each student who enrolls and is registered will be sending me um, a narrative response for the narrative class, a report response for the report class prior to the beginning of the session. Then we will go through the session. We have 4 interactive days, 2 hours each. And then I'm going to be doing a one-on-one session with each student. And then after that, they'd be given another set of prompts to choose one and respond. So we're having like a pre-assessment, assessment during the program, individual response, interaction with me directly, and then that final assessment. So I've switched things up a little bit based on the feedback that I've gotten for the times that I did that before. I think this way would really enhance the interaction because at this point, students should have content. They should know what's going on, what a report is, what a narrative is, what they're required to do. What they need now is someone who is knowledgeable in this area to check their work and give them the strategies that they can now practice between January to March when the exam is. So that's what we're doing in December. I'm trying to keep the classes small so that I can give people the information. So we'll be working on that. So if you are interested, you can WhatsApp me. If you go to the courses, all the courses are there. So woodcoach.com/courses. Go there, check out the registration forms, and you'd get all that you need, details of what is in each course, and so on. I'm also doing some teacher training because I believe that there are many teachers who were never trained in teaching creative writing and they're doing their best. But if they get some interaction with someone who is an expert in the area, they can really level up their skills. And parents are welcome as well. So if you're homeschooling or you have you're working with your child, you want to be able to support your child at home, then you can get some materials because I'm providing materials, worksheets that I use, and I'm going to be guiding you step by step how to teach report writing, how to teach the creative writing, narratives, as well as feedback. That's a critical point. Giving feedback, how to give it quickly, how to give it consistently, and how to make sure that you're there supporting every step of the way. So you don't have to guess about creative writing anymore. In addition to these lives, you're going to get me all to yourself for, well, 4 days, 2 hours each day, step by step, and the materials. And that's what I realize is a key thing. Sometimes we're given this is what you can do, but then when you stop to do it, you have to then go and create your own worksheets and then go and create your own templates. I'm giving you all of these things, and if during the session something comes up that you're looking for a particular worksheet style, then let me know and I can see about creating it, because this is my agenda. I really want to make sure that parents and teachers have the resources that they need to share with the students. I'm only one person. I keep my classes really small. So if I get full classes in December, that would be 10 students for narrative, 10 students for reports, and that's it. That's only 20 students. And how many thousands of students do we have? So I know I can't do it alone. So I want to share and empower teachers and parents to help students and help as many as possible. So wordcoach.com, wordcoach.com/, well, backslash courses, courses, and you'd see the whole breakdown there, and you can choose which ones you want to go with. And then of course there's the teacher training courses. So all the student programs are like 350. The teacher training programs narratives is 695 because you get a copy of materials, and the reports is 795 because you actually do get printed booklets and books that you can go through to use those. So, and I'm thinking of adding in a couple of bonuses, but I haven't worked them out yet because I really want to make sure when you're finished with me, you can head into a classroom and work with things. All right. So that's my input in terms of what's going to happen in December, 2 weeks in December, from the 11th to the 21st, I think is the Friday. So 5 days, weekdays only, no weekends. I use my weekends to prep. So that's going to be covered there. So all right. So I think I've covered how you can get additional materials, what those additional materials are, some of it, and what you need to know for reports. So let me switch over now to the narratives. And in narratives this week, what you're trying to get your child or students to understand is that post writing or rewriting aspect of narratives. So you want them to begin understanding um, the editing, self editing for narratives. We've done that before for reports, and now we want to focus on narratives. So for this week for narratives, what you're doing is going through what do you look for when you're revising. Students have a way of reading it over and they think about how it makes them feel, and they read it over and to them it sounds good, and that's their revision. That is not revision. That is maybe, okay, it's part of revision, but it's like just the first step. Revision has to be structured the same way plot has to be structured. So when you're revising, you need to go through plot and content, and then you go through what we call the mechanical aspects of it. So plot and content has to do with, am I seeing context? Am I seeing rising action and the different steps in rising action? Are they flowing from one point to the other? So let's say from the conflict, when the conflict begins, do I get a reaction from the main character? What is that reaction? Am I getting emotions and behavior? Then then am I seeing an escalation in conflict? Is the conflict getting worse? How do they react to this increase in conflict? Am I getting emotions and behavior? Do I see any speech there? Is there any speech? Is there any dialogue? And remember, speech and dialogue are two different things. And let me just pause a little bit here. Speech is when the character speaks. When the character speaks, they can speak to themselves, they can speak out loud to nobody in particular, or they can speak to another character. So speech is just what the character says. So there can be speech because characters sometimes, they think out loud, they speak out loud, they speak to themselves. Dialogue, on the other hand, is a conversation between two or more characters. So we want dialogue in the story, not just speech. I'm not saying leave out the speech in favor of dialogue. You can have both. But remember, you also need to have dialogue. If you check the rubric and see what is required, you would see dialogue, not speech. And so we do want to have that interaction, but I'm not saying to leave out the speech, because sometimes knowing what the character is thinking, especially if they're thinking out loud or speaking to themselves, it really enhances a story. So it's definitely a skill. You don't want to, dampen that, but just make sure the student is also adding dialogue, which is that conversation. This is another reason I always tell students, remember, have at least one other character in your story so you can have some kind of conversation. Even if the character is a talking dog, have another character in the story so that there can be dialogue. I mean, skilled writers can have conversation within a character's mind. So, like, me is talking to I, and myself is interrupting the conversation. I mean, we know how we do it, right? But in terms of writing and getting that done as a writer is not as easy to teach a child that kind of skill. Some students get it. I've seen some really amazing writing, but that's not something that you could necessarily teach in the space of time for this exam. They don't need it for the exam. So I would recommend spending your time working on descriptive writing instead. So just make sure they understand the dialogue. Give one other character so you can have a conversation. Doesn't have to be lengthy, brief, not a problem, but it needs to be there, right? These are the things that you're looking for in that revision process. So when you read your story, so you've spent the time writing the story and then you're going back and you're reading the story, what are you looking for? You're looking to see if the plot points connect. You're looking to see if there's enough information given to readers so they can understand what's going on. You're also looking to see if the main character is active during the climax. You want your main character to be active during the climax because remember, the conflict affects them and therefore they are participating in the climax. Even if it's to assist the person who is actually engaging in the climax, they have to be doing something to make the climax fun and interesting. We don't want the main character to just be there receiving everything. Story isn't going to be much fun. So you want the character to be active. So those are the things that you're checking for. Then, of course, you're checking for character descriptions and setting descriptions. I recommend having at least three each, and we want character physical descriptions, right? And we don't just want, you know, I see students are obsessed with the colors of their characters' eyes. And to be honest, unless the character's eyes are striking, how many of you actually remember the colors of people's eyes when you speak to them? You have an interaction with someone. Do you remember the color of their eyes? Seriously? I don't. I mean, I might just might just be me, right? But I don't, unless, for example, you know, it's a dark-skinned person and they have bright blue eyes. That's a contrast that I would notice. And so I would see that and possibly remember that, and I would notice something like that, and the character would notice something like that. We don't necessarily notice the color of people's eyes. Um, we don't necessarily notice the color of people's skin unless there's a direct reference to the skin or something. We notice blemishes like tattoos. Well, okay, a tattoo is not a blemish. Please forgive me. We notice blemishes like scars, damages to skin. We notice, like marks or uh, injuries, and like chicken pox, we will notice spots and those kinds of things. We will notice embellishments like tattoos and earrings and so on. So, especially if it's a really nice earring or if it's dangling or something. So, character description is important, but please pay attention to what you're describing, what you're adding, and why, The number one thing is that everything must have a purpose. Why did you tell me that the character had long, beautiful locks? How is that helping me understand this story? Is it helping me understand what the character looks like? Because I need to know that that is part of who this character is. Yeah, that works. That's fine. But have a reason for it. Don't tell me, well, miss, I put that in because I have to put a character description and I figure I could talk about here. All right, but why? Yeah, that's why I like that question. Why and how and give me some details, yeah? So reviewing stories, these are the processes that you go through. Look for plot, then look for description, and then you can go to the details, which is the punctuation and spelling and sentence structure and so on. And just FYI, this is the same process that someone writing a book goes through. And I know this because I'm an editor and I've written books. And this is the same process that you go through. You can't do everything at once because you miss things. So you want to go through it in stages. But then students need to have practice going through those stages so that they could make notes and make changes and have that step by step approach in their mind's eye as they're developing their revision for the story. So we're not just reading to see how it feels and if it sounds good. What we're reading for, we're going through it at least twice so that students need to leave back enough time at the end of their writing for this review session. When I ask students about, how much time do you have for writing? They say, well, miss, the exam is 50 minutes. I say, yeah, but you don't have 50 minutes to write your story because you want to spend 5 minutes at the beginning doing a plot. You want to spend at least 5 minutes. I would recommend about 10 at the end, reviewing your writing to make adjustments so that your writing time is roughly about 35 minutes. So, what you are doing is practicing to write your story in 35 minutes so that you can have this review time because your review time, you need to read your story twice. The first time you're checking for plot. Am I seeing rising action? Am I seeing development of conflict? Am I seeing a source of the climax? Characters can't just, get things done and figure it out. I mean, if they could figure it out, then why am I reading this story? What is the fun in that? It's so easy that they just figure it out. Oh, they got this bright idea to do this. Where did that bright idea come from? Readers want to know. Because if they had it in their head all along, nothing triggered this bright idea, then I've just wasted my time because this person was just pretending. They're playing games because they knew the answer all along. It's not going to be a fun story. So we need to get that intervention. We need to get that bright, that spark that starts the whole thing. Even if it's just like somebody cheering them on and saying, "Hey, you can do it. I know you can do it. Dig deep." Do and they don't want to disappoint people or whatever it is. There has to be something, and that's your intervention. So look for your intervention, and that's why when I tell students to do their quick plot is they must include their intervention and their lesson learned so that it can guide their writing. And then when they're going to review, that's what they're starting with. Their quick plot, they would have their notes so then they can double check. Okay, did I do this? Did I do that? I see it. Okay, that works. Whoops, I forgot I have to put in some intervention. So put my little note or write it in. Nice. I have that. Um, and then I also recommend writing down character description, setting description. So as you're going through the review, after you do that plot, you go back and say, okay, do I have at least 3 character descriptions? Do I have at least 3 setting descriptions? Do I have figurative language? Do I have imagery? And you're checking for that. So you know what it is you're looking for. And that's a process. That's not, I'm reading it and it sounds good, so I'm good. Or you know what, I have 2 more minutes and I'm still in the last paragraph. No, we want to time our students with a 35-minute writing so that they have time to review, because it's in the review that you do that, you really do polish and make sense of things. And so when you put that last full stop at the end of the story or the report, that's not the end. That's the end of one stage, but it's not the end of everything. You still do have to do that revision. So again, these are some of the things that I work with my students. We go through that whole process of reviewing. We do the discussion on how long they should take to write. And we do that. I give them a checklist, they do the planning and so on. And when we have our one-on-ones, I go into detail with that. That's what I'm going to be doing with the December groups. 1 week for reports, 1 week for narrative. So if you think your child doesn't have quite have that understanding of the different stages and how long it should take and what they actually need to do, or you want a second opinion of these things, because of course, working with the child's class teacher, you have that input, and some teachers are really awesome. Having that second opinion can just fill in one or two gaps that may be there, and that's all you might need. December classes, 350, 10 hours, that's like $35 an hour, plus you're getting a one-on-one session, not included in that, in the 10. No, it's not 10, so it's 8. Yeah, my math's not mathsing, but I'm an English teacher, right? So but you get the point that I'm trying to make, right? Um, so you're getting all of that plus a couple, the practice and the feedback. Feedback is important. So narratives, what we're working on this week, getting your child or students to understand that 15 minutes does not mean 15 minutes writing time. 15 minutes means 5 minutes planning, 35 minutes writing, 10 minutes review. And I know 10 minutes sounds like a lot, but here's the thing. If you aim for 35 minutes writing time and you run a little bit over, you're still going to get review time. But if you aim for 40 minutes writing time and you run over, then your review time is pretty much gone, and you're not going to get the opportunity to make those little changes that can enhance and make the difference between a 16 and an 18 kind of thing, right? So that's really what you want to work on. So all right, I think that's it for the narrative. So that's what you're working on this week. Making sure your child understands what is supposed to happen during that review time, the fact that they absolutely need the review time, and how to go about making those changes during that review time. That's what you're working on this week. So, and like I said, this is the same process that professional writers go through. They write, they edit, they rewrite, sometimes they edit again, then they pass it on to somebody else to edit, and then they format, and then they proofread after all of that, and then they publish. The really good ones, that is. Self-publishing created a little issue where people just write and then they publish. That is not going to get you far in publishing if you're writing your own books. So definitely get it into your child's head that there is a review process. These are the things that need to be done during the review process. And just like with the report editing that we did, if you haven't seen that episode, go back into the archive and check. There's revising and then there's editing. Revising means looking at the content and the plot for the narrative, and then the editing means looking at like spelling, punctuation, grammar, and so on. So we want to have time to do both. It doesn't have to be lengthy, but you want to be able to have that confidence and time to do both, that you're satisfied in what was produced, right? So that's it for the narratives. So far in this session, we've looked at reports, activity reports. So you have a plan of what you're going to do this week. For narratives, no, you should have a plan what you're going to do this week. And when I say this week, I mean Tuesday this week to Monday next week. You have a plan, just work out 5, 6 days, um, looking at the definition, looking at reviewing, timing myself with editing, have your child go back to previous reports, previous narratives, sorry, go back to previous narratives that they've written and make changes, edit them, rewrite them, see how that feels, time them, so they get familiar and they get that level of comfort with these things, right? And so the last thing I want to touch on today in the last 5 minutes or so is just to remind you of purpose in writing. One of the questions students are likely to get with their comprehension is, what do you think the purpose of this graphic is? What do you think the purpose of this article is? What do you think the writer's purpose was in writing this poem? Now, you're more likely to see it on the graphic and then possibly nonfiction. You don't really too much get it with poetry, but it's possible. And the main thing with poetry really would be like mood and tone. But you do get that purpose question coming up. And it's important that students are able to answer that. Many students, when you ask them, okay, what's the purpose of writing? Why do people write? They have to stop and think, and then they're not sure, and then they don't know what's happening, and it's a whole confusion because they haven't really been taught purpose or how to respond to purpose questions. So make sure your child understands that writing is communication and people communicate for different reasons, and what they communicate and how they communicate it is influenced by those reasons. And so we're looking at, am I just writing to inform the readers? Am I writing to persuade them? Am I writing to entertain? Am I writing to instruct for them to do something? Am I writing for there are six of them, and I don't remember the others off the top of my head. But these are things that I'll be covering. I have the notes and the worksheets and everything. These are things that I'll be covering in the comprehension section. But I did post up an article in SEA Peacefield, and there's one on, I think I put the same information in on my Facebook page as well. You can go back and take a look. Let me see if I have it up because I was actually refining my notes this morning on that. Um, no, I don't have it to bring up quickly. Let me see if I can get that for you because yeah, so there's six of them, and so you want that's your agenda this week, right? Making sure that your students understand that all writing is not created for the same reason. There are different reasons people write, and so when they're asked what is the purpose, the answer should actually be two parts to that purpose question. The first part is, if it's to entertain, then entertain in what way? Make people laugh, make people cry. What is, stir emotions? How? So your purpose, your answer to a purpose question has two parts, with general idea of what the purpose is, and then you have the specific idea of what the purpose of this particular item is. So that you're going with purpose on two levels, right? So I just found the document and I'm going to share this with you. Let me just share screen for a bit so that you could see, and then you can come back to the video and file share screen. Yeah, you can come back to the video and take a look at this, but I did share, I think there's a blog article on my website as well. So here you have inform, persuade, instruct, explain, describe, and entertain. So I forgot the explain and describe. Um, Describe, some people tend to put that under um, entertain, but it could also be covering nonfiction if you want to explain details or describe details of something. So that's why it's listed separately. So you have these, and so your students, your child should be able to look at something and say, hey, this is just informative. That's all the writer is doing, giving information. But then what are they giving information about? So then the response to what is the purpose of this would be to give readers information about, and then you state the topic. If it's to persuade, okay, the purpose of this is to persuade readers to do what? You have to answer that part of the question. Instruct. Okay, we're instructing readers, but what do we instruct them on? We're instructing them to do this. So I saw one of the practice tests recently. I think it's a Subnik. There was an evacuation plan. You know, you have in the graphic, you have the evacuation plans that are on the side of the building, and they tell you, "We'll take this way. This is where the exit is," etc. That is an instructional piece. That's not just to inform, because we're not just giving you information so you can have it. We're instructing you on the best route to exit in the case of an emergency. So if that worksheet had a question, what is the purpose of this graphic? Then it would be to instruct visitors to the building on the best route to exit in the case of an emergency. So you want to be able to answer that complete question. So the first part of answering a purpose question is whether it's to inform, persuade, instruct, explain, describe, or entertain. And then the next part of the answer to a purpose question is what are we doing this for in this specific instance? And so make sure your child knows that and how to get that done in terms of purpose, because they are quite likely to see that purpose question for the comprehension passage and the graphic. Probably not so much in poetry, but you can review and see, okay, what's the purpose of this poem? Check it out. Maybe it's to entertain, maybe it's to inform, maybe it's to make a point, persuade people to do something. It could fall under there. So, check it out and see that your child understands and can identify these things. And that is going to really help with comprehension. Okay, so I think that is it for today. So I'm going to wrap it up now, just reminding you of a couple of things. One, for reports, you're focusing on activity reports. Two, for narratives, we're looking at how do you revise, how do you edit and make changes, what do you look for, and I gave you some guidance on that. For comprehension, we're zeroing in on that purpose question. Make sure students understand the different types of purpose in general and specifically what they do to answer that question. And finally, my December classes, comprehension, narrative, and reports for students, training in teaching and supporting students with not comprehension, with narratives and reports for adults. So teachers and parents, you can register for those programs and get the worksheets, get the texts, get the materials, plus me showing you how to do it. And you get direct access from me, because after the program, you have access to the recordings for up to 30 days, but then I'm going to be opening a Facebook group where you can ask questions directly. You have access to me because, like I said, my agenda isn't just to teach students because I can only reach so many. I really do believe writing and comprehension can be taught in much more interactive and better ways. So I want to share that information to as many people as possible. All right, so check it out. If it's not something that you can engage with at this time, share it so that somebody else might find it very useful. So feel free, share it around. It's on my Facebook page, the flyers. It's in SEA Peaceful Approach. It's on my website. You can share the link so they can go directly and find out what is in the program so that they can access this information this December, end the year on a positive note with gaining some awesome new skills and supporting your children in the best way possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I think that's it. Anybody has any questions on anything, put it in the chat so that I'm going to check back after session so that I can answer the questions. You can also just WhatsApp me. My number is 717-4993, and you can get a copy of the report booklets. I have a separate series of booklets on narrative writing as well. Those are specifically geared to Standard 5 students preparing for exam. If you're looking for Standard 4 students, I have separate materials for that. Message me and we can have a chat about those things. All right. Thank you very much for those of you who were able to get the live today. I appreciate knowing that I'm not talking to the web and just, in general. I'm talking to real people who have real concerns and real questions. So let me know. Tell me what your questions are, and I'll see how best I can help you. Anything related to narrative writing, report writing, as well as comprehension. So I look forward to getting your questions and your comments and feedback so that I can tell others, hey, go check out the lives. This is what people are saying. It's useful, it's helpful. You can get your questions answered and share my December classes so that, I can be able to help as much as possible as I can there as well. So have a wonderful rest of the day today. It's raining where I am. It's drizzling now. I hope it stays that way and doesn't get worse or the weather clears up a little bit. If it's not where you are, enjoy the sunshine. If it is, it'll pass soon. All right. Have a wonderful rest of today, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.